Cheers to the weekend. Um, had a bit of a break from socials this week in the light of what's been happening in the US, and it got me thinking on my Twitter feed this week with a few people that I actively follow, and we discuss lots of things. And we were posing questions on palm oil, which is such a huge problem for Indonesia, Malaysia especially, mostly Southeast Asia. And it got me thinking about the intrinsic relationship between palm oil, the corporations who operate the businesses which create the oil, ship the oil, and then use the product and one of its many derivatives. There are about 426, I think, names and derivatives of palm oil. And the majority of the products that are manufactured are all controlled by a few of these companies here. So you'll see some of these brands: Nestle, Coca-Cola, Unilever, Kellogg's, PepsiCo, Cadbury, Mars, and these companies, if you look at them from a product perspective, they have grown in size over the years because they're able to make huge profits at the expense of the planet in terms of the footprint that the products that they use in their manufacturing cause to the environment. And that's a real huge concern, or should be a much bigger concern for all of us. And so I'll maybe screenshot this and I'll add it into this post. I also wanted to give you a couple of things which I've just kind of printed off the internet. They're not particularly great images, but the idea is to show the real huge problems that deforestation causes. So if you look at this picture here, this green picture is from around about 1970, and that's Southeast Asia. So in this picture you have Burma, you have Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, Malaysia, Indonesia down at the bottom. That's what, in the 70s, all the green there basically is forest, rainforest. And if you look at it now, in 1990, they've chopped down quite a bit of it. Now that's not to say that it's all been used, that land is now being used just to grow palm oil, because obviously society does develop and advances, and population increases, towns and cities must expand. But that's just one single example. You can see here, if we use this example, 1950, pretty green, it kind of goes along this way, and down here, 2020. So 1950, 2020, we've almost taken opposite roles. This one here, I wanted to show you. This is Indonesia. Indonesia is a very complex geographical, socio-eco-political situation, always, and it will always be very complicated. There's military regimes, there are Muslims, there are probably every world religion, and because Indonesia is a developing nation, classed as a developing nation, it's very much open to huge corporations coming to their lands and to their regions, and basically bribing and through corruption controlling the production of palm oil. And the reason I wanted to talk about this today was because, in light of what's been happening in the US this week with the Black Lives Matters protests after the tragic death of George Floyd, I spoke on my own Instagram yesterday about the differences that we might well face going forward, in terms of how we change, or how we might have changed during lockdown, and how there are changes and differences now relative to before. And it's also very dangerous how the narrative of the death of George Floyd has really impacted and resonated around the world. And I have lived and worked and traveled to just about 70 something countries across the world. And I would say that sadly, racism is alive and well. Um, However, it doesn't matter the color of your skin. If you have no money, if you have no opportunity, if you have no education, no access to healthcare, you will arguably always be kind of trapped in your little bubble where you just strive to survive. And in times where, where business is good and you have money, um, you live like a king, and then you return back to being the pauper or the prince, when business is not so good. And what I really wanted to do was just appeal to everyone's better nature, that beyond the lockdown restrictions lifting, uh, to try and make some of these small changes that we've made more permanent. Shopping from your local butcher, local stores, supporting independent businesses. Here in Glasgow, we have a great artisan industry of everything from charcuterie to cheese to poultry. We have all these wonderful things on our doorstep, and I really hope that people will maintain those changes and shying away from the supermarkets, because palm oil destroys not only rainforest and ecosystems. It trashes huge swathes of very diverse ecosystems within rainforests, and arguably the rainforests of Indonesia account for about 20% of the world's carbon dioxide consumption. And if we keep on chopping it down at the rate that we are to produce palm oil, and around about 60% of what is grown is actually sold and used as biodiesel or biofuels, mostly in Europe. And that cost of producing is not only the cost of shipping the oil and then the carbon cost of burning an oil. We have this compounded sense that the people who are out there actually doing the labor in order to produce the fruits, or the palm oil kernel, the nut, which is pressed to give the oil. These guys are suffering, and I don't think that a little black square on your social media posts really makes that much difference. I really don't. I understand why people do it, and I understand why people have done it. Maybe they don't know about the bigger political circumstance and situation in the US in terms of the way that media controls mainstream narrative, with the Russians colluding with whoever to rig elections and such like. It's a very, very complex thing to understand. But I really wanted to appeal to anybody out there who has the choice, or who has the opportunity to buy a product that doesn't contain palm oil. Please do so. This is the modern day take, from my perspective, of what is happening in the US just now. You know, black people have always suffered racism, and as have lots of other races, religions, and demographics of society. But there's huge global outrage at the moment with what's going on in America. And whilst the media is pushing that narrative to you, Indonesia continues to burn, and Indonesia continues to suffer huge hardship. And the problem with corporations like this who don't pay any tax, or are based offshore or whatever, they don't care. If someone turns around tomorrow and just says no more palm oil, sure, they're already 10 steps ahead of you, planting something else in order to make up that shortfall. But it's Indonesia and Malaysia, all these countries in Southeast Asia who have to pick up the pieces, and rebuild their communities, which have been decimated. Orangutans displaced is a heartbreaking thing to see, but that is caused by consumer demand for cheap food, cheap cosmetics. And if you just take one little moment out of your day before you consume a pre-packaged product, which, if it comes from any of these companies and brands, will almost guaranteed to contain palm oil. That's the problem. Being able to drink Coca-Cola or Kellogg's breakfast cereal cheaply in our supermarkets and our stores, that causes deforestation and causes human rights abuses of the workers. And I urge people, if you can, to eat seasonally, shop locally, think globally when we spend our money in stores. There are lots of great people out there doing great things with palm oil free brands and other such initiatives, but it really relies on all of us making many small changes. And if you stop buying the product on the shelf in the supermarket, they will be forced to find alternatives. It's just that simple. They hide it, and the use of palm oil and the 420 something derivatives very cleverly in labeling, in food labeling, and that is something which we can change, but it's very slow to happen. So I urge you, if you can, to drink a glass of wine or enjoy a drink in the freedom and the safety and comfort that you have at home, and maybe do some research on where your food products come from. Where does the palm oil come from that is in your cosmetics, in your shampoo, in your hand soap? It's in absolutely everything. So read some labels at home, see what they put palm oil into, see where it's hidden. You'll be really disgusted, I hope. And I just wanted everybody to raise a glass to all the people who are suffering all over the world. Great hardships that don't get the column inches, that don't make the media because they're not populist. I know so many of them in Indonesia, and that's what really pushed me to set up Vanillism and give people an opportunity, whether that was through education, support, tourism, helping them do whatever we could to better themselves and the lives for their communities and for their families. So I'm going to be doing a lot more on palm oil going forward. Ordinarily, normal service will resume on socials, but I'm going to try and take some time out every week now to make a video such as this on the horrors of palm oil. And thanks everybody for following and for liking and joining us on our Vanillism journey. We're now over 800 followers, which is quite astonishing because we started from an absolute get-go only 2.5 years ago. We've got lots of amazing things ahead in the jungles, and we look forward to bringing them to you. And we thank you for your ongoing support. and hope to see you in person after lockdown again sometime soon. But Sláinte, as we say in Scotland. Have a great weekend, guys. Cheers.